Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christos Drosos. I'm a principal consulting engineer from Apple. And later on, I'll be joined by my colleague, Andrea Minotti. We're going to talk about some of the new features announced this year that have been put into practice across our Apple OS 26 family of products. So we couldn't be more excited about where we are now from where we came from. Humble beginnings, let's call it, where we spent a lot of time in education. I've been at Apple now almost 20 years. The entire time I've been focused on the enterprise. And what we've seen over the course of time is just consistent growth. Almost hockey stick, maybe it's the beginning of that hockey stick, but I'm still waiting and focusing on that handle. So from the shot here, you could see our products get used in a variety of places across the enterprise, education, government, and healthcare. As Jeremy said earlier, we're focused on three very big things this year. iTunes, no, that's not right. Mac, iPhone, iPad, and Apple Vision Pro. Our products continue to excite executives, knowledge workers, factory workers, and we've been seeing a huge uptake with customers who want to talk about Apple Vision Pro and how that fits into their organization, how they can take advantage of it. This past June, we had our developer conference. We had a select group of developers, influencers, and executives that joined us. We talked about the new technologies. Somewhere behind the bush is, I think, Mike Lin. For those of you that know Mike Lin from the Mac Admin Slack, I swear he is somewhere behind that big tree. I can prove it later with a picture that I have. You probably haven't missed our announcement from a couple of weeks ago. I'm still waiting on mine. Show of hands, how many have picked the orange color? Okay. Blue? Who went with traditional silver like me? Okay. Table for one. Okay, cool. At Apple, we focus on the experience, and we focus on the user and how they are made to be the most productive individual they can be. Today, we're going to talk about 4 topics. I'm going to take you through the first 2, and then I'm going to hand it off to Andrea to talk about the next. We're going to talk about some of the capabilities in Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager. We're going to talk about this new feature called device migration, return to service, and then we're going to finish up with Platform SSO. So first, Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager seems to be a mouthful. I think based on some of the content we've shown this year, we can call it AXM, and we can know what we mean when we say that acronym. It is a web-based portal where you will go in and see how to create managed Apple accounts, federate with your identity provider, as well as create relationships with MDM servers like Jamf. New this year, we added the ability for the inventory to show up. So things like IMEI and EID for iOS devices. When the device was released. MAC address is there for iPhone and iPad. We are aware. We'd love to see that for the Mac, and that is coming at some point. Later this year, you'll also see Apple Care details will be provided as well. So for those of you that are still keeping the flame for that GSX integration, I think when that shows up, we can all just let that go peacefully, hopefully. Finally, managed Apple accounts can now be used for more developer services like app notarization, and you can decide now how those managed Apple accounts are used. You've seen some of the changes we had in terms of what happens on device. In the previous iterations, it was using email, but now, as long as you're on a device running iOS, iPadOS, macOS 26, tvOS 26, not tvOS 26, sorry, Apple Vision OS 26, the user will be prompted that you have decided to take back their email account and to pick something else. We've also shortened it from a 60-day window down to a 30-day window. Now, when you go into do the domain capture, you'll see there's an ability to download a list of users where there might be some conflicts. It is not everybody who's used your organizational email address, but it is a subset. Think Business Connect, iTunes Connect, App Store Connect. Seems to be a pattern there. My suggestion, pull the Band-Aid off as soon as possible. Embrace it. Think about your executives, who they are. Thankfully, there's a finite group of executives in your organization. Have the folks that provide that high-touch support, find those people, take a look at their devices, and get them to transition off of using their organizational email address. Take care of those folks. They may or may not have a hand in your promotion or bonus or upgrade from a salary perspective, so make sure they're taken care of. For us, the folks, we can work with you. Our teams can provide some of the content that showcases what that experience would look like when they transition. There's only one teeny caveat. When it comes to the Apple Developer Program, there is a process for the person that is the account holder where we can transition that user over as well. This has been a feature I think a lot of you have asked for, and thank you. We appreciate the feedback. But not only can you decide whether a managed Apple account can be used on any device, managed devices, supervised devices, you can also decide which accounts can sign into a device, whether I want any Apple account, which includes personal or other organizational managed Apple accounts, or just my managed Apple accounts. So that's great. There are some corner cases where you're going to have some special folks in your organization that, might need to use a personal Apple account. I would say please submit that feedback, explain what the use case is. We are always listening to improve this experience. This next feature is what I'd consider one of those real enterprise organizational surprise and delight. We've been talking about it for some time in my team, and I think there's been a lot of folks looking at this, especially for those that interface with the asset management groups in your companies. So we built this API that will now allow you to see what devices are in your AXM portal, what servers they're signed to, and to be able to move those things around. You'll need to be their administrator in an ABM perspective, or you'll have to be a site manager from an ASM perspective. The goals here are pretty straightforward. One, we want to use the same platform that we use for managed Apple accounts. We want to follow the OAuth protocol. It's based on the OpenAPI spec, which is a standard language-specific interface for RESTful APIs. We've designed it with some room to grow, so keep that feedback coming of what you'd like to see. And of course, we are going to rate limit it, and no, we're not going to tell you what those limits are. Because this is intended for a machine-to-machine experience, not a human running a script, the products that you're using or building should have the resiliency built into them to understand what messages are coming back from AXM when you're using this API. So where can you learn about this API? Well, of course, the developer documentation, naturally. Here is the QR code. One of the few times at an Apple event that you could take out your cameras and take a picture of it if you'd like to. I've yet to hunt down someone who's taken a picture without authorization, but one day I will. Here's what we have in terms of the supported endpoints. Yes, there could be more, but we'd like to know. We wanted to start with this and see what the uptake is, and then iterate from there. Now, let's see. So here's the other one. This is how you'd go about implementing this capability. If you check out the site, it'll give you, here's the second picture to take a look at. It will give you some sample code from a Python perspective, as well as some curl commands that you can run locally just to get a sense for what's this experience going to look like. Now, I'm going to warn you in a little bit, there's going to be some code on the screen. Two things. You don't need to understand what it is, and I'm not going to explain it. It's just to illustrate that this is what the art of the possible is. What I'd like to see is some of the folks that are in the asset management universe adopt and embrace this capability on your behalf. But if you wanted to go out and do this, have at it. First thing you'll need to do is sign into Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager with the aforementioned capabilities. You will go to where it says Amy Better Bag, and you'll go to the API and click that black box. You can create a number of different API accounts. I've been creating one per computer, just because why not? After you create it, it'll download this PEM certificate, which is the private key for this key pair. And then to manage it, you'll have to click it. So I will admit, the first time I went through this process back in June, I was like, where are the details? And I then went, oh, maybe if I clicked around a little bit and did a little more curious, I'd find it. So these are the details you'll need for later on in what I'm going to show you. The private key's already been downloaded. You're going to need the account key ID as well as the client ID. So this is the trigger warning of showing you a little bit of Python. This is all available on our developer site. So you'll need these imports. The one that might screw you up, because it screwed me up, is I needed to install PyCryptome. I was searching for crypto.public library, crypto, and I wasn't getting anywhere. And then Claude, my best friend, explained it to me in a very nice way. Some of the details here, where I've entered these into the Python script. Yes, that is the name of my computer. Yes, I'm a Phil Collins fan. Why aren't you? Here's where we're defining what the JOT is going to look like in terms of the headers and the payload. I'm also not making up. It is pronounced JOT. It's also a lot less words than JWT. It's less of a mouthful. Here is the process. You're downloading the private key from AXM. It's being installed on your Mac. Then you're doing this JOT handshake with the authorization service. So we're going to do that. We're going to go through a couple different steps. Here's a post method that will send the signed assertion to the API authorization endpoint. And now you're connected. Great. So now what can I do? Well, the response, you'll get this access token, which will live for about an hour. And then we keep going through this, where I can pull, let's say, a list of all the MDM servers that are connected to my AXM. This will return a JSON blob, which to the untrained eye is a little bit like Greek. I happen to understand Greek, but we can always clean this up. We can have a bit of a loop function if we wanted to, or we can spit out something that looks a little bit more human readable. So this is just a quick, simple example of what can be done, where I can use this API to see what MDM servers I've got connected to my AXM portal. Now, for some of you, this Python stuff is old hat. For some of you, this might be new and a new muscle. Have no fear. If you want to go and test this on your own, there's some great open source projects that have been put up on GitHub that you can take a shot at. First one is ASMB util. Pretty straightforward tool that you can download, run locally, provided the salient pieces like the private key, the client ID and the key ID, and then you're off to the races doing the same thing. This one was written in Swift. Second is this API client for macOS. This is actually a Xcode project that you could download if you were so inclined. Open it up in Xcode, compile it, and then follow along. So again, this is more of giving you a sense of what can be done and sort of the conversations that you can have with, let's say, the ServiceNows, the Omnitsas, the Flexeras, those sort of organizations, and what is it that they can do for you. So that was my call to action that I jumped ahead of. Great. Next. Since the first MDM came out in iOS 4 back in 2010, there were already customers that were wondering, great, we've adopted this MDM solution. What happens when we want to transition? And we had a very straightforward answer. Well, we'll just transition to a new MDM, we'll wipe the devices, and we'll re-enroll. And that did not go over really well with most customers. It took us a while to figure out how would we achieve this goal. How could I make it so that it's an elegant experience to go from an old MDM, an on-prem MDM, to a cloud-based MDM? There's always that possibility that my MDM vendor is no longer in business. Maybe you're the one person out there that's still holding on to Profile Manager. I hope you don't exist, but you never know. So inside of AXM is where all of this is going to be handled. We built upon the capability of switching which MDM a device is associated with, and once that device is running macOS, iOS, iPadOS, or visionOS 26, there's a new capability that gives you that migration by date. You'll have to take some things into account, like where you're using apps and books, aka VPP, and making sure that as you're going to go through this transition process, how am I accounting for the applications that users need? Here's where I mentioned what that UI is going to look like for the assignment. If you've been wondering why I'm not getting the next thing, I'll show that in a second. Christos is all over. Eligibility, the UI, the status. So this experience here. A lot of folks had a question of like, I did the thing. The device is running macOS 26, but I'm not getting a pop on the device. The pop doesn't show up on the device until the new MDM picks up the association, creates the enrollment profile, and uploads it to Apple servers. Upon that point is when AXM is made aware of it, issues a push notification to the device. So if you're wondering why the heck that was the case, that's the reason. So if you don't have your MDM set up in such a way where it's automatically creating an enrollment profile for every new device that's added, that's where you're probably going to get stuck with this. When that when that migration deadline hits, if there are applications that are open, the user will be asked nicely to shut those applications down. And then what will happen is the device will be unenrolled from device management. But fear not, all is not lost. The device already knows what's the new MDM server it should talk to. It'll go through the process. It'll pull down the new configuration. It'll talk to the MDM server. And then you'll have a green check mark, or gray, depending on how you see color. Thank you, you're welcome. Try the veal. There's a couple caveats in terms of what happens with the managed MDM user. So if you're an organization that uses a tech to set up the device and the user becomes user number 2 or 502, you're going to need to do this unenrollment, re-enrollment as that 501 user. So this is some of the considerations you need to take into account. The PRK will stay valid, but you should be thinking about using the FDE recovery escrow payload with the new enrollment. Last but not least, what I want you to think about with this experience of device migration is forget about the word migration. Focus on what's the best user experience for enrolling a net new device in your organization. Get that part of the experience tuned. Get that perfected. Also, make sure you have an enrollment network, a provision network, a guest network, because you have to think about this. At the moment that I unenroll from the previous MDM server, I no longer have a network configuration that was given to me by the old MDM. That stuff's gone. So you need to make it so that the user can connect to your guest network so they can enroll as though it was a brand new device. You'll need to make sure that you have the matching configurations. So if you're delivering a Wi-Fi configuration, you want to make sure that that's there. If you're using ETLS, which you should be, that is judgment you're hearing, you should absolutely be using the await device configured capability with Jamf. Because if you do not, you could end up in a space where the applications will not stay on the device. So during this process where the device is in that fugue state before you're releasing the device for the user to start using it, you want to make sure that the new MDM server is managing those applications and the underlying data that's in that app. Definitely a good idea to be rotating that personal key. Make sure you can preserve the apps. But last but not least, if you're going to be going through this process, please reach out to Jamf, reach out to your partners, reach out to us. We want to make sure that you're making all the right steps as you're going through this process. And now, I'd like to hand it over to Andrea Minotti. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Andrea Minotti. As Christo said, I'm his colleague on the consulting engineering team. And I get to talk to you today about two topics that have to do with shared use. And I want to show you both the implementation details as well as what the end user experience is like for both of them. So first up, return to service. So return to service, which you heard about this morning from Jeremy, allows a device management service like Jamf to automate the process of resetting Apple devices. This year, we made that process even faster by preserving managed apps. When the service sends a command to erase the device with that return to service dictionary, it securely erases user data without eliminating app binaries. In just a few minutes, the device can be ready to hand to the next person. This is available on iOS, iPadOS, and visionOS 26. To accomplish it, you will need an enrollment profile that has these things in it. So, of course, as usual, setup assistant panes that you want to skip. The is return to service key, which puts the device in that return to service mode, and the await device configured flag. The last two things are very important. They result in a snapshot being taken of that freshly enrolled state that will be used as a basis for the future return to service workflows. So if you already have a device enrolled in Jamf and you want to start using return to service, you will need to re-enroll it with these things present so the basis can be laid. So we're going to do a quick dive into the Vision Pro return to service experience. Return to service is brand new on that platform this year, and there are also some unique and very innovative ways that it was implemented here that I think are worth calling out. So one way Vision Pro is unique is that we built into the operating system a number of ways that the user themselves can trigger the return to service flow. So first of all, if the user picks up a device that's at the lock screen and they want to make it their own, they can do that when it's in return to service mode. They'll see at the very bottom of the enter passcode UI, press digital crown to reset device, and that will kick off that return to service flow for them. Or if the user before them was especially kind and polite, they would have gone into Control Center and hit that reset device button, and that would have kicked off to the return to service flow at the end of their use of the device. And it's a very polite feature. It lets the user know, hey, we're good. You can take off the device and set it down, and it will chime when it's ready for the next person. So no one is held hostage wearing the device, waiting for anything to happen. So how would you set this up? So first thing you want to think about is if you're having someone who's going to be very frequently setting up the Vision Pro for themselves, there are going to be a number of setup assistant panes that they will probably want to skip. And the good news is we added about 14 new setup assistant skip keys for visionOS this year. And one of them is the all-important tips pane. If any of you have gone through the tips flow more than once, you probably realize you only need it once. So that's a good one to skip for repeat users. Another very important innovation that drives those on-device reset flows is this allow join before first unlock key. It's a new key on the Wi-Fi profile, and it is required for that on-device initiation. It's a very special key. If you're familiar with the way our file system data protection design works, When the device has just been restarted and it's sitting on the lock screen, the device doesn't have access to its Wi-Fi passwords normally, so no connectivity there. But thanks to the Vision Pro team pushing this innovation, we have this key. But there are a lot of restrictions on it. First of all, it's only for Vision OS. It's only in this return to service mode. Only one Wi-Fi network per device can have this superpower. And also the Wi-Fi network has to fit within these bounds. It can't have any of these aspects to it. So all this is documented on the Wi-Fi profile documentation, but just know that you'll need to make sure that you're skiing within the poles here. So as I mentioned, there are many ways that return to service can be initiated. You can do it the old-fashioned way with an erase device command from Jamf. You can also use the new Jamf return to service app that they recently made available on Vision Pro. And then there are those on-device options, the lock screen, the control center. There is a timed option, so you can say you want the device to go through the return to service flow every 2 hours. But if you want to use those on-device options, you must have that Wi-Fi profile with that allow join before first unlock key. So let's get the end user perspective. So imagine this has just happened. We've used one of those ways to kick off return to service. And you can see here that the next user is greeted with a message again that they can take off the device, set it down, and it'll chime when it's ready. And we also get a visual indication on the outside of the device. We have this beautiful eyesight animation that rotates like a washing machine, letting you know that the device is cleaning itself and getting itself ready for the next person. And finally, when it's time to get started for the next user, they are invited to do this the fast way. So if any of you have done this, we introduced a way for you to save your what we call enrollment data. So the eyes, the hands that you set up the first time you use a Vision Pro can be saved on an iPhone or an iPad. And this is your invitation to use that previous enrollment. And in case you haven't experienced it, this is what it looks like. So if you're using the Vision Pro, you'll be asked at the beginning to pinch some dots in a circle. You'll scan your hands. All of that can be saved on a nearby device. Managed Apple accounts can do this, but they're just going to save it locally, so you'll want to use that same device. Personal Apple accounts can save it up to iCloud. And just if you're in education, just know that this is not something that student managed Apple accounts can do. And if you're curious, this is what it looks like on an iPad, the act of saving this enrollment. And I promise you, like a fine wine pairing, if you're going to be using return to service, you're going to want to also make it possible for folks to do this as well, because it really speeds things up. So next up, platform single sign-on. I know a very popular theme this year, many sessions on this topic. As I mentioned, I'm going to try to give you, the end user experience perspective in addition to the implementation perspective. So it's certainly an area where a lot of innovation has been going on, and not just this year. This has been going on for quite some time. Where we are today extends back through a long series of additions, starting back with macOS 10.15 with the first SSO extension. And then now we're here at macOS 26 with registration and setup assistant, authenticated guest mode, and tap to login. So what is Platform Single Sign-On? I think we all know, but it uses the existing Single Sign-On extension to extend to the macOS login screen. And this allows users to use their identity provider credentials to unlock their Mac. So previously, Platform SSO required manual registration by the end user. Today, you can activate and enforce Platform Single Sign-On during Setup Assistant with automated device enrollment. And this was a very big feature request. So this is what it looks like. So here the Mac is going through automated device enrollment. That's the first screen you'd see. And now a new Platform SSO pane appears in Setup Assistant, prompting the user to authenticate with your chosen identity provider. They will not be able to proceed without this registration. After a successful sign-in, SSO provides an authenticated enrollment into device management, so Jamf knows whose device this is, and if federated to the same identity provider, can sign into the user's managed Apple account. When this happens, a local account is created, and the password is either synchronized with the identity provider or set by the user using a secure enclave-backed key. Additionally, if you want to make it pretty, the account's profile picture can be synced from the identity provider. So now authenticated guest mode. With macOS 26, Platform SSO adds authenticated guest mode, which includes, as before, single sign-on for apps and websites. When you pair this with Auto Advance during setup, the Mac will silently complete Platform SSO registration, enroll into device management, and land at the login window ready for a user to log in. We think this will be especially useful in education, for example, in a lab environment or in enterprise for Macs that shift workers share. And as Jeremy mentioned this morning, there is a very big sweet spot in healthcare for authenticated guest mode. So to help you get a picture of this option, I wanted to show you a day in the life of a Mac that has been set up with authenticated guest mode. So I worked with my colleague, Jacob Deckinga, to record this experience for you. Jacob's pretty amazing. I consider him a Platform SSO whisperer, so if you ever have any detail implementation questions, I would say Jacob is a great person to chat with. But here we go. So imagine that this is a Mac that is set up at the front desk of a workplace where people need to share the Mac throughout the day. Now remember, this device was previously registered for Platform SSO, and now we're ready for day-to-day shared use. So we'll start with Dave Knox. He has the morning shift. He's entering his Microsoft Entra ID credentials at the login window. So entering his password. And now PSSO is reaching out to the identity provider, Microsoft, to verify the user and fetch the SSO token. Now, because of this outreach, the amount of time it takes to log in can be very dependent on the speediness of the network. So it can take around 15 or 20 seconds like this. And remember, if you're thinking about things like multi-factor, this Mac was already registered for PSSO and is a trusted device in this organization. It's performed an Entra join. So now we're going to go into Safari in this session, and we're going to test out the SSO extension. So sure enough, here we are on this Microsoft website, and we're going to be able to see that we don't have to enter any credentials. We are going to be signed into Copilot as Dave Knox. There we are. So we didn't have to type anything, click anything. We just automatically got logged in thanks to that SSO extension. So now we're going to go to one more website just because later we're going to show you that the history is cleared and we wanted one more thing in there. So we got one more thing. There's the history. Cool. So next thing we're going to do is Dave's going to create a document and he's going to save it on the desktop. So while we're working on this document, I'll note that you will still have your usual ways to customize the Mac experience with authenticated guest mode. So you could still have a acceptable use policy document in the corner like you might for lab use. We also gave you a nice wallpaper image and we customized the doc. So all those things are possible in authenticated guest mode. So now we're saving to the doc. Now this was a highly confidential document that Dave just created, and he's going to have to take his coffee break now. So Dave's going to go on his coffee break. What's he going to do? He's going to go to the lock screen. Cool, we got his name there. We know that the session's going to be held for him, so that hard work that he did on his document is not going to go away. Entering his password again, and he is back in action. So his session is there for him, and he was able to protect it when he stepped away. So now we're actually going to log out of Dave, and you see that we're being told that all the files in the user's home folder are going to be deleted now. The guest user's home folder. So now all of that's being cleaned up. The guest user's home folder is being cleaned out. And we will have the opportunity now to log in as a new employee. So this is Eliza from the afternoon shift. She's going to enter her credentials here. So again, here we go. We are reaching out to Microsoft Entra ID to verify this user, get that SSO token. All of that back and forth is happening. And we are back on the desktop. And we are going to go into Safari and check that history. So you can see we're fresh in Safari. All of Dave's history is gone. And we're going to go back to that Microsoft website and watch SSO do its magic again. See how we're now logged in as Eliza Block. So there we go. That's what that experience would look like for those shift workers coming in. Just as one more final piece to show you, we're going to pop into the device management section of system settings and show you all the stuff we have going on with Jamf. By the way, that self-service plus icon in the corner Got that too. Here we are, the all-important Platform SSO profile here. We can see what we have going on with the single sign-on extension. And we're going to scroll down here, and you can see the new user authorization mode is set as temporary. So there we go. Hopefully that was helpful to just give you a real day-in-the-life experience of authenticated guest mode. Again, we really feel like this is going to be, very, very useful in education and lab settings. So really, I hope you'll check it out. I just want to point out there's actually one more key that you can use, and I imagine it would be a very tempting key to use, because who doesn't want a faster login? That's the temporary session quick login key. And it will get it down to around 5 to 7 seconds, which is great, but caveat there that was a very purpose-built mode for a certain type of use of the Mac, particularly in healthcare, and that is we're going to use the Mac very lightly. We're just going to go on the web, use some websites, maybe use an app that was custom-built or purpose-built to not save to any of the places that are not going to get cleaned out during that quick login. So for example, the native Notes app saves to the user's home library folder. That is not going to get cleaned out when you do a quick login. So just think about that. This is not meant for a situation where the user is expecting to have a full run of the Mac. So use that when it's appropriate. So the next and last thing that I wanted to point out, we've heard a lot about it today, but it is a wonderful innovation with Platform SSO, and that is tap to login. And anywhere we can avoid entering passwords is great for end users and great for security. So tap to login works with authenticated guest mode, which I just showed you. So you can imagine how much quicker it would be to get into those sessions if I can tap to log in. It uses an access key credential tied to the user's IDP account. This is an NFC-based hardware-backed key that the device uses for authentication. iPhone and Apple Watch store the key in Apple Wallet. And the access key also works with express mode, which doesn't require unlocking the device that holds the credential. You might have experienced express mode, for example, when using a transit pass, for example. So that type of mode works with authenticated guest mode. You will need, of course, an external NFC reader for the Mac if you want to use this mode. So this is what it looks like. I just get to tap my device, and this is express mode. So there it is. I'm into the Mac temporary session seamlessly with my Orgoned identity. So again, we're very excited about the ways that the use cases that this will open up, particularly in healthcare. There's that workstation on wheels we talked about this morning. Perfect candidate for authenticated guest mode. Now, I didn't want to forget about iPad. We also have the ability to use extensible single sign-on on iPad. And we have our two forms of shared iPad. We have the personalized shared iPad on the left with managed Apple accounts, and the guest session on the right. Both of those could be used with an extensible single sign-on setup. And in fact, there's a session coming up where Jamf has done some pretty interesting work with Rapid Identity to use ESSO on shared iPad for a really seamless experience. So highly recommend checking out this session if you want to learn more about how this could happen on iPad. So that's all. I will recap with our standard set of resources. I'm sure many of you know about the Platform Deployment Guide, important place to check out, documentation of our features. Also the Apple Platform Security Guide, and another plug for a session. Tomorrow we have our usual security session. And that's it. So just a quick summary of the things that Christos and I talked about. And there's even a few things in there that we didn't talk about, like the ability to add Apple Vision Pro to your Apple School or Business Manager organization with Apple Configurator for iPhone. That's available now as well for any Vision Pro that you bought outside of your usual purchase flow. But really, so many other things. So we're here for Brain Dates, so happy to chat more if there are other features that piqued your interest that we didn't get to cover here. So really, thank you. It's been a pleasure being here, and look forward to meeting more of you as this continues.